Hey everybody, it's Jason with Parallel Reality coming back with you today with an article from the Daily Wire. It's an opinion article by Matt Walsh. Doesn't actually say when it was dated, but I'm guessing because I found this on vacation, it was at least a week ago. But this is something I've mentioned in other videos as well. That, as it says here, there's a competency, or it doesn't really say it here, but a competency crisis coming up, especially with airplanes, and basically because of this word. So the article is how government diversity initiatives are leading us to a major airline disaster. And I wouldn't even say just that. I mean, though that's frightening, but just kind of a lot of other disasters. So let's get right into it. It says here's a thought experiment. Imagine one of your buddies comes up to you with a big smile on his face and tells you that he just got a brand new job. He's vague on the specifics, but he says it's a federal government gig that pays six figures. It didn't require any kind of bachelor or associate's degree or a physical fitness test. But your friend does tell you that as part of the application process, he had to complete a couple of computer exams. Then, as the conversation goes on, your friend recounts a few of the questions from one of those exams. He tells you the questions went something like this: would more classmates remember you as humble or dominant? When did you start? What age did you start first making money or first start making money? How many high school sports did you participate in? At this point, you're thinking to yourself, this is a little odd. What kind of would ask questions like this? This all sounds kind of dumb and unserious. So your friend reassures you that he had to complete a second test as well. The second test was asked slightly more challenging questions like, what's the difference between the numbers 8 and 6? If you answered 2, then congratulations, you can also pass this test. Now, at this point, if you had to guess what job your friend just landed, what guess would you make? Based on all the information provided and knowing this is a government job, what would you think? Well, I personally think, sounds about right for a government job. Well, you'd probably make some obvious assumptions right away. You'd think, at a minimum, that whatever your friend is gunning or whatever job your friend is gunning for in the federal government, it can't be that important. Right, exactly. I think it's like a peon job or something. And indeed, there are a lot of very unimportant jobs in the federal government. That's an understatement. Says jobs that were made for incompetent and unimpressive people. Maybe your friend got a gig in the Department of Education, for example, or the IRS. That would make sense. But then imagine that your friend informs you that he is not working in some frivolous government agency that contributes nothing of value to humanity. Imagine he tells you that in act he applied to be an air traffic controller. And after just a few months of training, very soon he's probably going to be directing planes with hundreds of people on board. This may be a hypothetical thought experiment, but it is very much grounded in reality. I didn't make up any of the test questions I mentioned earlier. They're all based on real air traffic control exams or practice exams. Wow, so we're asking people just to do basic subtraction on those? All right. Says now 10 years ago, this little hypothetical scenario would have been unthinkable. But everything changed very quickly in 2013 when the Obama administration earmarked on a plan to diversify the ranks of air traffic controllers. Obama's FAA chief announced that he intended to transform the agency, which includes air traffic control, into a more diverse workplace. As part of that plan, air traffic controllers no longer needed to take a more demanding cognitive assessment before being hired. Instead, all they needed was a high school diploma and the ability to speak English. All of these tests were dumbed down to the point of being absurd. Yeah, it seems pretty absurd based on those questions from earlier. Says the result over the past decade has been exactly what you'd expect. The number of air traffic controllers who are not white men has significantly increased, according to the FAA. Coincidentally, so have the number of near collisions involving commercial airlines. According to a database maintained by NASA, which relies on data self reported by pilots, the number of near misses has more than doubled over the past 10 years. Again, not frightening in the least. Says in just the past year, there have been more than 300 near misses involving commercial airlines, averaging more than 5 per week. Just to emphasize the point again, they diversified the FAA and near misses immediately doubled. Correlation does not prove causation, but it can point towards it. And in this case, there is a giant glowing sign pointing in that direction. Of course, only a handful of these incidents receive any major media attention, so it's easy to underestimate the scale of the problem, no matter what media outlets or social media platforms you frequent. That's why, in a moment, I'm going to go through some of the near misses that have gotten very little coverage. But I'll start with an incident that did get some attention from the national news media because it helps put the broader problem into some context. This incident happened in July when air traffic controllers put two aircraft, an Allegiant Air passenger plane and a Gulfstream jet, on a collision course shortly after the Allegiant plane took off from Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport. And here's the link to watch it, which we are going to skip over right now. Says the report goes on to mention that the pilot's last minute evasive maneuver was so extreme that it sent one flight attendant to the hospital. If there's anything reassuring in this clip, something that might make you feel a little better if you, like me, plan on boarding a plane in the near future, it's that automated software called TCAS saved the day. This is a system that relies on transponders that are installed on all domestic aircraft. As you heard, it's capable of, and that would have been in the video that I didn't play. So as you heard, it's capable of sounding an alarm in the cockpit and directing planes away from one another if there's a risk of an imminent collision. It's a failsafe for when air traffic controllers mess up and command planes to fly into one another. But TCAS isn't perfect. It certainly doesn't prevent all mid-air collisions. In 2002, for example, a passenger jet and a DHL cargo plane collided over Germany because one pilot followed TCAS while another listened to the Swiss air traffic controller, who, incidentally, was later murdered by a surviving family member of several passengers. In fact, just this year, TCAS failed to prevent a mid-air collision at an international airport in this country. Whoa, almost had to sneeze there. Sorry. Here it comes back. Nope, we're good. Okay, so Houston Hobby was where that was. So fortunately and miraculously, no one died as a result of that collision, but it was very close to being disastrous. This incident illustrates the obvious, which is that the failsafe is not capable of solving all mid-air collisions, nor is it designed to. Particularly when planes are close to the ground and covering a lot of ground very quickly in close proximity to one another, things can happen too quickly for the system to respond. Those are the kind of incidents that are happening more and more often. A month ago, at Portland International Airport, for example, an Alaska Airlines jet turned directly into the path of a departing SkyWest airliner. Air traffic controllers didn't notice this until the planes were right on top of each other. In that case, the Alaska plane was trying to land, but it had to execute a go around because of high winds. Around the same time, the air traffic controller tells the departing SkyWest plane to turn right, but for some reason, the Alaska pilot responds to that command and turns to the right, straight into the path of the SkyWest plane, and the controller completely misses it until pretty much the last possible moment. Radar data shows that the planes came within 250 feet vertically and less than 2,000 feet horizontally. An even closer near miss took place in August at San Diego International Airport. Controllers cleared a private plane to land right on top of a Southwest plane. They noticed their mistake just before the private plane hit the Southwest jet on the runway. The plane got to within 100 feet of the Southwest passenger jet. There's no TCAS system that can prevent something like that either. If the visibility had been worse, and if the controllers didn't notice the problem, there would have been a collision and hundreds of people would likely be dead. And yeah, that's what we're uh, basically that's going to happen here, and that's not going to stop these people from pushing this DAI stuff. And that's been like my argument the entire time, is that this is their religion. They're going to push it, and people dying doesn't matter to them. Like it's just not something they even consider. It's just no, no, no. The DEI comes first, and if people have to die, then that's just the way it is. Again, they really do not care. So let's go back to the article. It says you can go to YouTube and find many clips showing these near misses. We won't review all of them here, but I do want to share one that may be the most shocking recent example. From JFK Airport in New York City earlier this month, which is one of the busiest airports in the world. An American Airlines passenger jet was lining up for its approach when air traffic controllers told a small private plane to light up for a parallel runway, but the private plane didn't follow that instruction. Instead, it made a beeline for the same runway that the American Airlines plane was going for. At no point in this process did controllers notice the problem. They also didn't notice that the private plane didn't read back the right clearance. Instead, the only person who noticed anything wrong were the pilots of the American Airlines jet when the private plane was right on top of them, and that would be the YouTube video. So yeah, it says, if we hadn't bailed out, we would have collided. That's what the pilot of an American Airlines Airbus said just a couple of weeks ago at JFK Airport. There was apparently no TCAS instruction to take evasive action. It says if there had been, the pilots should have called it out, but they didn't. There was certainly no ATC warning. One of the pilots just looked out his window or maybe saw something on a screen and realized a plane was coming right for him, and he realized just in time to save a lot of lives. Excuse me. Man, a lot of bodily functions going on here. What the hell? Says I could go on and on. There was the Southwest Airlines flight on July 2nd, which had to abort its landing at New Orleans International Airport because a Delta plane was taking off from the same runway. The passenger planes came within seconds of hitting each other. That same month, an American Airlines plane nearly crashed into a Frontier Airlines jet on takeoff because nobody, including the ground controllers, noticed that the nose of the Frontier Airlines jet was jutting out into the runway. Earlier this year, in February, an air traffic controller routed a Spirit Airlines flight within 200 vertical feet and 700 horizontal feet of a cargo plane. You get the point. It's true that we can't blame this dramatic rise of near misses solely on diversity and equity efforts. Single variable explanations are rarely sufficient. This is a complex issue. For one thing, when Ronald Reagan fired more than 10,000 air traffic controllers and went on strike in 1981, in violation of federal law, a bunch of new controllers needed to be hired. And many of those controllers recently hit retirement age all at once. That creates a staffing crunch. That's all true. But that staffing crunch was foreseeable. It's been obvious it would have happened since Reagan followed the controllers more than 4 decades ago. The problem is that instead of providing incentives for competent people to become air traffic controllers, say by raising the salary and providing more training and offering better hours, the government chose to do what it always does. It drastically lowered standards in the name of equity. And the Biden administration is still proud of it. Right now on the FAA's website, you'll find this line. Does the mission of the FAA involve securing the skies of a diverse nation? It only makes sense that the workforce responsible for that mission reflects the nation that it served. And back to Matt Walsh saying, actually, that doesn't make sense at all. The job of the FAA and air traffic control is preventing catastrophic accidents where a lot of people die. It doesn't matter what the workforce looks like. That's very true. Who cares? Because everyone knows this, because deep down, everyone knows that diversity doesn't matter. That's why no passenger on a plane has ever cared in the slightest about the racial makeup of the guys in the cockpit or the ones on the ground directing the plane. Just like nobody has ever cared about the diversity of fire departments when they're trapped in a burning building, and nobody has ever cared about the diversity among brain surgeons when they have a tumor that needs to be removed. When it comes down to it, when it really matters, diversity doesn't matter, and we all know it. But that's all the FAA has been focused on lately. Just a year ago, the FAA launched yet another initiative to diversify the ranks of air traffic controllers, meaning to hire people based on qualities other than competence. The FAA calls this the BATC campaign. The agency says in a press release that, building on last year's successful campaign to receive more applications from women and other underrepresented groups, the FAA will again work with diverse organizations, host Instagram live conversations, and work with social media influencers. Yeah, because that's who we want to work with. So that's what the FAA is working on right now. We'll be getting more women and more underrepresented groups to receive Instagram influencers. That much is clear. What's not clear is whether we'll be getting a workforce that's capable of preventing two jetliners full of passengers from colliding with one another while they're each going in excess of 500 miles per hour. And that's alarming, to say the least, because every single week we're discovering that the existing crop of air traffic controllers is barely capable of doing that. Keep in mind that this is all happening even as airlines also begin their own quest to add more equity to their ranks. It was only a couple of years ago that United Airlines pledged to diversify its pilots. Many other airlines have followed suit. Soon we will have diverse air traffic controllers directing diverse airline pilots while thousands of lives hang in the balance, and inevitably many are lost in the process. Yeah, it's gonna destroy the airline industry because people are just not gonna want to fly anymore. And you can point it back to this exact thing. Says you often hear aviation experts say that nothing ever gets fixed until a lot of people die, which is not a thought that will help cure your anxiety about flying. Yeah, no shit. Says, but it's true, and it's been true throughout the history of aviation. Planes didn't have wind shear detectors until commercial airliners started crashing in bad weather just shy of the runway. TCAS wasn't mandatory until there were a lot of midair collisions. Pilots didn't have to de-ice until an Air Florida plane nosedived into a Potomac after to the Potomac, not a Potomac. It's not like there's more than one. Dive into the Potomac after sitting for too long on the tarmac on a snowy day. What this means is that, if history is any guide, soon enough, we may finally start to get some solutions to the air traffic control debacle we're all seeing right now all over the country, from Portland to San Diego to New Orleans to New York, pretty much any other major metropolitan area in this country. And that's because, as problematic as it may be for the Biden administration's equity agenda, we're closer than we've been in more than a decade to a disaster of truly historic proportions. And when that happens, a lot of people will die. And then, and only then, when it's too late, will anything be done about the problem. And yes, and these places should be sued off their asses for it, because you're hiring essentially unqualified people to do things that they are not qualified to do. And just kind of going, okay, well, when people die, then we'll fix it. And it's like, you might want to get to it before that. But anyway, let me know what you think about this in the comments below. Like, share, subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon.